gentlemen, we were discussing about this earlier. 107 billion Kenyan shillings is what the government wants or aims at recovering or attaining with the new taxes. The new taxes meaning on the mobile transfer, the money mobile transfer, that will be about 37 billion Kenyan shillings. And the fuel that we're seeing will be about 70 billion Kenyan shillings, collectively 107 billion Kenyan shillings. Honorable Kipruto, what are the options for President Uhuru Kenyatta and for Kenyans in general?
Well, there are 1,001 options. One is to be prudent in the management of resources that we have, including the pilferage that does take place every year in the budget, losses, corruption, and outright misappropriation of resources. Number two, we can scale down on the ambitious projects that we've been talking about. Because we do not have to implement projects if we do not have the resources. As the Englishmen say, cut your coat according to your cloth. Whatever material you have is what you measure, and you cut your coat. The other thing is also to realize that what the CS and what the government has done in general to continue levying the duty on fuel is actually an abuse of the process of parliamentary procedure. They should have allowed the process to go through. The president should have, of necessity, made a decision before going out of the country, whether to assent to the bill or not to assent, so that we know exactly what the position is. And if he doesn't assent, he should give us the memorandum to Parliament to say, I'm not accepting this because of 1, 2, 3. But they have now gone ahead to levy. Let's assume the president comes back and he assents to the bill. What happens to me and you, who has fueled and paid 16 shillings more?
But even for the buyers, they would have bought that fuel already at a much higher price, so they will be making losses, and they don't want to do that. Hence why we're also seeing the fuel shortage.
Yes, that's the main challenge. That's the main challenge. What will happen to me? What will happen to will the petrol station refund me? What will happen in the intervening period? And you know, prices of commodities, once they go up, they hardly come down, including the cost of plowing, as I said earlier. So it's a big challenge, and I think the government needs to get serious and respect Kenyans.
All right, what are your thoughts on this?
I think, just as Waziri says, there are many options. If you want more money, there's more money being collected in house rents. There are more landlords. The Kenyan economy is land-driven. The bulk of what we invest in housing. So people rake a lot of money from rents. If you are to design, register, and then charge rent, you'll get more money than on the fuel. But the fuel one, the negative impact will be much more than what we are collecting.
And here's the thing, gentlemen. It's not that President Uhuru Kenyatta's Big Four agenda could be too ambitious, because there are countries that are doing housing and all these projects at a much lower, or rather in a much friendlier cost. Just take a look at South Africa and Ethiopia, the electric trains in Gauteng and also in Ethiopia. First of all, the electric trains, and I'm sure it was at a much cheaper cost than our own SGR right here. Then the other thing would be, and whether, I would love your thoughts on this. What do we do then? Where do we look for the other revenue sources? Because then IMF, I'm sure, is Henry Rotich is also getting a lot of pressure from IMF and the World Bank.
No, this IMF and the World Bank, we use it as an excuse. Honorable Kibaki came into power and ignored nearly all of them. Just started collecting money and utilizing it. Well, little corruption here and there, not looting. Now we have reached the era of looting. You collect in bags. This collection in bags is a recent phenomenon. Before you could pilfer kidogo. You see, when you are cooking, you taste one piece of meat and soup. Now they turn the whole pot. Then they run away with it. Then they just leave you. They add water out the pot. That's exactly what they do. That's what the president needs to cut. And it will not be cut through drama of arresting people early in the morning on a Saturday and blah, blah, blah. It will be cut by sealing those loopholes. Secondly, it is good to build houses, very good. But you can build a house at such pain that by the time now the house is finished, you can't go into it because you are either dead or in hospital. The Big Four agenda are good, but they should be as a celebration. If we are going to die before we receive them, these houses that are done after we are dead, then they are not good. For now, the president should come back and address and say, okay, between the houses and the suffering we are going through over this 16%, which one is it? He must decide for us. People are dying. The small person now, you go to town, offices are empty. You can now find parking anytime in town. You see it, Nakumat is closed, Uchumi is closed, several companies are closed. Things are not good. So, even if we will do well later, please, let's have ourselves alive for later.
And on that same breath,
yes.
Are Kenyans supposed to believe that their MPs will bring down the cost of living?
The MPs are talking like they're mad. When a member of parliament starts and saying, oh, Rotich, we will come for you, they know very well they passed the law themselves. They said they were duped that there will be oil in this country. There was no oil. Then they postponed it 3 years. Again, they postponed it 2 years. Then this time they postponed it, but late. So the president also waited when they were to see. Now you go for a teach, you know very well it's an excuse. The person who has the final say now is the president. Why can't they just tell the president, Your Excellency, please come back, there's an emergency, sign this, or we email, or we send a courier to you with the bill, you sign it, or tell your minister to stop it. So when you get the wrong solution, you are definitely not curing the problem. Attacking the CS Treasury is not the answer. This is the president to deal with. So when we have our MPs behaving like that, playing for the gallery, you know you are on your own, with God alone.
But yes. Kenyans do not even want to see, especially critics, do not want to see President Uhuru Kenyatta postponing this to 2020. They want it to be removed, completely scratched out.
I think postponing it is good. It was presupposed that by the time it is coming into effect, we are so rich as a country that you don't feel it. There are certain things that you plan for. You know, when you budget,
right? You
budget that I will buy a V8 and a V10 and a V12. By 2030, I have a V12. And then you walk, you run. If by the time you reach 2020, you can't afford a motorbike, you buy a bicycle. You don't now channel all the funds into the V10, then there's no food, there's no school fees, there's no medical, so you are in your V10, but nothing. That's where we are. We are saying, Mr. President, this is good for the big four agenda. They are very good, and we want them. Me, I want the railway to reach Kisumu, and Busia and Bungoma, but let it be when I'm alive, not when I'm dead because of these things.
Honorable Kipruto, as a former Minister of Agriculture and someone who is very passionate about farming, has the Jubilee government let down the macroeconomics of the country?
Well, completely, because we really don't need to say a lot. Look, this is September. Last year's proceeds from maize has not been paid. The sugar subsector is actually in ICU. The coffee subsector is also in trouble. Tea has its own share of problems. So in totality, President Uhuru is not addressing the issue of food security, because food security is not about giving people maize or giving people food. It is the ability of every Kenyan to have access to food in the right nutritional value and also in the right amount, in a sustainable manner. And therefore, when we are talking about all these issues, including this VAT on fuel, you are actually saying we are undermining the issue of food security. You can afford to say we scale down. Instead of, let's say, tarmacking roads, we maram some of them. Instead of doing 10,000 houses, we can do 7,000 of them. Still, we'll be moving towards our agenda. President Kenyatta does not have to do all these things in 4 years. As long as he can set the wheel moving, Kenyans will be able to achieve their own momentum without suffering.
This fiasco that we are seeing, that between 2013 and now, and probably even 2020, our legislators, have they played are they a big part of this problem?
Well, I do not entirely want to blame members of parliament. I just want to blame squarely on the government. As I said, members of parliament are just like mechanics, but the main designer of the budget is the government itself. And therefore, when you are designing a budget, you are able to convince yourselves in the cabinet that this is the best way to go about. Then, through the committee system of parliament, then it is the CS to convince members of parliament that this is doable. Issue of IMF, issue of World Bank, all these donors does not arise because they don't come to you. You go to them that have a problem. I want to solve 1, 2, 3. And these are the proposals I want to achieve. And they will ask you, where will you get the revenue?
And perhaps on the issue where we say, okay, our members of parliament did not know about this, that we thought that by then Kenya would be an oil-rich country. Should they then, in such a scenario, have experts who can come in, Kenyan experts, economists who can come in given this scenario and say, this is what we think as experts and critics in this scenario?
Well, as a member of parliament, somebody should be self-contained. Self-contained in the sense that you must be aware of your environment and how it impacts on you. So if a member of parliament says he did not know, that is the height of naivety, and I wish their constituents could listen to them. So the next time, such a fellow remains in the village.
Right.
Otherwise, he has no business hanging around parliament buildings and saying he's a member of parliament.
Weda, the High Court will be on September 19th delivering a verdict on lawyer and activist Kenyatta, who perhaps is speaking for the millions of Kenyans.
Yes.
Your thoughts on this, and do you think the High Court will rule in his favor given the predicament that we are in?
No. I think a serious judge would not get into this. These are matters of policy and law. If law was passed by parliament, and it is good law.
But that affects common wananchi.
It is not the role of the judiciary to look at the welfare of the wananchi. It is the role of the judiciary to interpret, implement law. When it is passed well in line with the constitution, then they interpret it, they implement it, they adhere to it. So if, for instance, parliament was to say that people are dark as weather, will be killed, and then the constitution is also amended to allow it. You get it? And international conventions are also amended. The judiciary will look and say, okay, this is the law. So what Kenyatta is trying to do through parliament, through the judiciary, is asking them to annul a law. They should ask the president to accept and sign, or parliament to take it back and pass that law and say, we have removed this 16%. Transferring problems to the wrong people so that they are made to look bad is very bad. When the court rules against it, they'll say, oh, this court is not independent, and so on. The key is in the hands of the president. Your Excellency, we are suffering. Please come and sign that so that this 16% is set aside. This gerrymandering and sub-rattling about Kenyatta, siju who, when we elected people having big salaries and they feign ignorance, is dishonest. And we cannot see our leaders being dishonest at a time when we are hungry and are dying. We can get mad, and when we get mad, we can take back the power. So, President Uhuru, please listen to this. This is a serious one. It is him. There is a bill before him which he needs just to sign. Just a signal. He can close his eyes and sign it. The rest we will deal with. Those houses, as my Mheshimiwa says, can be scaled down, or please, we are willing. I was told, and I'm a firm believer, that I can land under a tree if I'm fully fed. I can sleep under the bridge if I have food. But in my mansion, without food, you are dying slowly.
It's a different scenario.
Yes.
Okay, so still speaking on this same issue, because you know President Uhuru Kenyatta is still in Beijing for the China-Africa Summit. The other question, and that's what we are asking our viewers this morning, if you could hop onto social media, Twitter's at KTN News or at Zinzi_K, is whether the loans that we're seeing from China as Kenya, but even more so on the African continent, whether it is a curse or a blessing. Honorable Kipruto, your thoughts on that?
Yes, first of all, this issue of Kenyatta, there are two possible scenarios.
Okay.
The president, if he does assent to the bill, then that issue will be superfluous by the time it gets to court. And if it gets to court without the president assenting to the bill, then possibly the court may give advisory opinion. It will not annul the position that the CS has taken. So that's the way I see it. On the issue of foreign aid, you know, Africa is burdened with a lot of debt. And Africa is becoming a net market for the world. Because for every $1 that gets to Africa, for every $1 that gets to Africa, $7 get out of Africa. For every $1 that is in, 7 goes out. 7 go, yeah. And for every foreign aid that comes to Africa, if it's $1 billion, half $1 billion will have left the country within the year. So these are facts. They are not created by me in the studio. And given that scenario, there is no country that has developed with foreign aid Foreign aid is just something like going to, for some little money, to sustain an ongoing system. Some of the individuals have been arguing that America has higher debt ratio to GDP, but the systems are working.